But those sovereign entities that stand around the crack in the wall will need help from legitimate sources that validate the possibility of the hologram. I don't expect science to label the hologram good or bad, or imbue it with philosophical issues like deception, polarity, separation, etc. The Wingmakers have explained that around the time that the human portal is activated, a scientist of great stature will emerge with a theory that will support the inception point. It is all being facilitated by their hacking into the program of these and other individuals.
Do you know the name of this scientist?
No.
Do you think it's you?
No. I have no stature. No one has ever heard of me. The Wingmakers were speaking of someone who held a high degree of credibility in the scientific community.
I still don't see how it will happen. I mean the wall coming down. If things are as screwed up as you say, people will follow their programming. They'll have too much fear to release everything they've learned, to be real and true. I just don't think people can make such a radical shift.
I agree. They can't, not in the face of the status quo. But the status quo is part of the wall that will be taken down. You can't paper over this. You can't wave a magic wand and pretend it doesn't exist. The wars between races, religions, classes, geographies, relationships of every scope, these cannot be pardoned by a savior or ET race. They have consequences, and these have to be dealt with. The status quo, the old normalcy, the comfortable distortion, will be removed, because you cannot build a heaven on earth as simply as plopping a new reality layer on top of the status quo. It would be like adding the Grand Canyon on top of a skyscraper. The skyscraper can't support it.
The amount of change that's coming sounds overwhelming.
If there's one thing I learned in this interaction with the Wingmakers, there is a programming track, and then there is a super consciousness track. The latter is involved with how quantum reality membranes intersect, and can create chain reactions that ripple across every dimension. These chain reactions are guided by event strings designed by beings from very high dimensions. As I previously said, every being has the I am, sovereignty, but they also possess the we are, integration. As the I am asserts itself through the expression of behaviors, either resistive or insertive, the I am disentangles itself from the program, the human 2.0 interface. It begins to reconnect with the we are frequency, or the tone of equality as the Wingmakers have referred to it. It broadcasts this through the unconscious mind or universal field, making it easier for another being to touch into this same perspective and adopt these behaviors. My point is that either the designers of the higher dimensional planes, or humanity as a collective, could potentially accelerate or decelerate the grand portal.
What if there was a tug of war, like the higher beings wanted it sooner, and humanity wanted it later?
I don't know. I suspect the higher dimensional beings would listen to the resistance. I really don't have an opinion on that one.
One day, hopefully in the not-too-distant future, a person will hear this interview. What advice would you give them?
Everyone has thoughts and emotions. Everyone shares a reality called Earth and the human body. We're all on the same stage, playing different roles, but the stage unifies us to some degree. None of us can look across the stage and see a beautiful world of peace and harmony, or goodwill to all men. It isn't the reality that encompasses us. The question is, how do we move closer to a reality that supports our most innate truth, that I am, we are? How do we create a stage and write a play that supports our transformation into the sovereign integral, that is in fact what we each are? Has religion shown the way? Has spirituality? How about science? How about our education system? Government? My point is that nothing that is currently in play is uniting us in equality and oneness. If you look at everything in your world, after you hear this interview, you will see that our world is designed for a very specific function, and this function is to feel separation. It can be as obvious as the color of skin, gender and different cultures, to the subtler distinctions between religions and spirituality, but the design is fractal, and it infuses everything in this world, in this common unity I have called separation. Ironically, our unity is separation. If you agree, if you also see, or sense this separation, you might also decide that it's escalating, not moving in the direction of unity, but further towards diversification and distinction, as if the more granular humanity becomes, in its information access and expression, the more it drifts apart into clumps of similarity, that feign unity within the clump, but expresses separation to the whole. The leaders of this world, whether they come from political, economic, military, religious or cultural perspectives, know how to speak the language of unity and oneness, but their actions are the result of programs that often act in reverse. This isn't about thoughts and language. This is about behaviors and actions. People know how to disconnect from their thoughts and say one thing, and then do another. They know how to feign care, but their actions demonstrate hollowness. This is not an indictment to every standing solution, but nothing has worked. Religion's failure has birthed the nihilistic and disillusioned organizations of darkness and occult experimentation. They feed off one another. It's symbiotic survival. But what is lost in this is the reality that confusion and disaffection reaches into the world's populations, and dulls our collective minds and hearts. There is hope. Hope resides in the vacuum of unity and oneness that is unaligned to anything on this planet. No one owns it, or controls it, or administers it. There is no mediation or a go-between. It is completely unique. For all intents and purposes, it has never been seen or heard. It is on the other side of the wall. This is our hope, as foreign and strange as it may seem. What is in this world is not working, and it is because of separation. I don't care if you read the most esoteric, spiritual information on this planet, it is of separation. I've read esoteric, spiritual documents, over the past 20 years, that would make most people swoon, and say to themselves, this is the highest information, or this information is true because it is so detailed. No one could possibly know this much detail, unless it was true. The most esoteric information on this planet was not written by human beings, but through human beings, vis-a-vis channeling. The channeling speaks of wonderful spiritual realities, of how humans and aliens are one, of how the deep psychology of human beings is constructed, of the complex cosmological environment in which humanity is nested. All wonderful information except no one mentions how we are enslaved, or why, or by whom. Not one. If these wonderful sources of information knew about how humanity is enslaved, wouldn't they share it? Isn't this the most basic point of information? What the Wingmakers call the inception point. Why hasn't any of this esoteric literature shown this? I'll tell you, because the beings are either inside the hologram and don't realize it themselves, or are part of the deception and are guarding its discovery from humans. They're no different from us, as infinite beings. They're lost in this hologram of deception as much as we are. For those of you who hear this interview and are unsettled by it, I can only say, good, you should be. It's a reality check on a cosmic, universal and individual level. You can bathe in the splendor of spirituality, and quench your thirst with the presented masters, or you can deepen your understanding of the reality that confronts us, and stand up committed to apply your self-expression in service to truth. To walk your life in the expression of resistive and insertive behaviors. To be sovereign and integral. It isn't about spouting high spiritual concepts in thoughts and words. That is the reflex of the consciousness system. It's parroting and robotic. Live the I am, we are, in your behaviors, and leave the mind. Shutter it. The mind is programmed to compare and analyze, which feeds the me-you separation. Sorry about that. I got a little carried away with my answer.
No, it was good to hear your passion for this. I guess the thing that's interesting to me is that the Wingmakers' materials are esoteric, at least to me, and they seem to be explaining cosmological systems and psychological structures. How is it different than what you were just saying about the channeled information?
Sometime this year the Wingmakers site will be released on the internet, at least a part of it. Its only goal, according to its authors, is to introduce one concept, the sovereign integral. That is the fractal seed for the inception point. The second phase will introduce practical behaviors to support the sovereign being in their deprogramming of what it means to be a spiritual person. The third phase is to anchor the inception point and create the crack in the wall.
You've talked about the crack in the wall as the inception point. Can you elaborate on that a bit more?
I will, but first let me state something that I want to mention before I forget. The youth of this world are impressionable. They're transitioning from the subconscious implants of their parents and forefathers to the creation of their own personality. They want to be different, they want to express themselves uniquely, and this opens them to influence. Where does this influence arise? Increasingly it comes through technology and the culture creators of music, entertainment, games and books. They bring the tools for youth to knit their unique layer of personality that can fuse atop their genetic layer of consciousness, the subconscious. The glamour models, as the wing makers refer to them, convey a powerful elixir, which is to be selfish and self-obsessed. Narcissism is okay. Nihilism is the philosophy. This is prevalent and it will continue to spread, because this is Anu's program. When technology is unleashed, in the form of global platforms, the impressionable youth will inform their consciousness and personality layers by means of this underlying philosophical belief in nihilism. The way this seeps into the culture, through technology that helps codify personality in our youth, is one of the clearest examples of how Marduk's programming spreads. However more sophisticated the technology becomes, the more integral it is to the person, the more the culture creators will exercise this philosophical system in humanity.
Why?
Because nihilism is the belief in nothing, and if kids build their personality and belief system from these ingredients, they will be more obedient to their internal programs.
Why?
If you don't really believe in the higher reality of our world, you are more inclined to relinquish your sovereignty, or the I am consciousness. The phrase, selling my soul to the devil, is simply code for, I surrender to the will of Anu, and desire to let him take my life for his purpose. The unstated objective of that renouncing of the I am, is that Anu will give me something in return for my sacrifice. But the only thing that is returned, is slavery to the system. You walk your life according to your program, and the program ensures you are a puppet, whether you are rich or poor.
I'm glad you mentioned children. Do you see them getting this? And if so, at what age?
If you mean, will children understand the information that I've shared tonight? Yes, of course. In many ways, they'll get it better than their adult counterparts, whose human 2.0 interface is more welded or infused into the human uniform. But the wing makers have written the material so that they will be understood by the prepared, and age is not the key factor. It is the preparation.
Like what? I mean, what constitutes preparation?
Preparation is willingness to change. It is a lack of fear to embrace a completely new paradigm, and just as much, to release the old. If a person is poorly prepared for this information, they defend what this information tears down, which is nearly everything. They are not prepared to step into the vacuum of change that this information brings into their life.
But why?
It requires a lot of responsibility to accept this information. This information is unsettling because you are on your own. We are on our own. There is no savior, or army of angels, or ETs who are going to collect the good and bring them to their heavenly home. This also requires work. It is behavioral adjustments. It is impeccability. It is authenticity. It is attentiveness. It is caring. It is not a party. It is not surface cosmetics. This is a sober journey into self-realization, no matter how that realization appears. It is a commitment to that premise. You don't say to yourself, I'll walk that path, but only if I get to go to heaven and rest in paradise with beautiful souls all around me. That's not this path. For those who want that path, they can subscribe to the religion or cult of their choice and find those kinds of promises aplenty. This information is for those interested in breaking through to their true self, and in doing so, not to rest and relax, or party and enjoy, but to serve truth through their behaviors, until everyone crosses into that reality of oneness and equality, from which we came.
You were talking about the insertive behaviors a little earlier. I wrote some of them down, but I didn't hear the word love. Did I miss it, or is it missing for a reason?
Love is not used frequently in the wing makers' materials in general. I think in part that's because the word carries so much baggage in this world. It has a kind of sentimental, codependent energy in terms of relationships, and then in culture it's used so casually, almost like a catch-all phrase that people use to greet one another like, how are you? Love is the unification force. It is only that, and yet, in many ways, that is everything. From the wing maker's perspective it is a very important word concept, even though they use it sparingly. The 6 heart virtues I mentioned are considered the different ways in which love manifests in our behaviors. To this extent, love is expressed in these virtuous behaviors like gratitude, compassion, forgiveness and humility. In that context, the 6 heart virtues, collectively, are the expression of love in the human dimension.
What about joy? It also seems to be missing.
I know this information seems very sobering and unsettling. Because I defected from the ACIO, I have 2 forces that would like me to fail. This pressure has weighed on me. It had activated a degree of paranoia within me that I didn't know was possible. For this reason, joy, at least as it pertains to me, has not yet been a part of my personal experience. I'm sure everyone will receive these materials differently, especially the information in this interview.